Hello everyone, my name is Shubhajit and today we will be discussing about the use memo hook in React. This is one of the very important hooks whenever you are learning React. So let's get started. Use memo hook is basically used for performance optimizations. So if I tell you in a way you can understand is that it works by making cache. So whenever we use this use memo hook, whatever the return value of this function, that will be cached. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about its structure. So if you see use memo, it has a function and then it has a dependency array. Okay, all of them who has watched my use effect video, they might understand there is a similarity between the two. In use effect also we have a function and then a set uh, of variables inside a dependency array. If you want to know more about that, please uh, go and watch the use effect hook video. I will also put it down in the description. So yeah, let's continue. So inside the use memo, whatever function we have, inside that function there will be something returned. Okay, and this return value will be cached. Now, how we are doing the performance optimization here? You can see that we have a tab variable here, okay, inside the dependency array. This actually tells React that whenever this tab value changes while re-rendering of the component, while the component is re-rendering, whenever this tab value changes, then only call this filter to do's, else don't call it. Let's say if the tab value is x and in the next render also the tab value is x only, then don't call this filter to do's method, because inside filter to do's we are only passing this tab, and this tab, if it is not changing, then there is no sense of calling this. Okay, and it might happen that in filter to do's there will be a very expensive task which is going on, which is taking a lot of time, which is blocking the UI for a long amount of time. So we don't want to call it again and again on every re-render of the component. Okay, so in these cases use memo is used. I hope you have understood that. So let's actually remove this use memo and go with the normal implementation without use memo. Okay, so here the visible to-dos variable is actually getting the value after calling the filter to-dos, and there is no use memo used. So whenever the component is rendered, every time it will go inside this filter to-dos. And here you can see we have console logged some statements to see, okay, the filter to-dos is called or not. So filter to-dos called, and then we are actually artificially slowing down while the function is called for 1000 milliseconds, that is for 1 second. So for 1 second we are making a delay, and then actually we are returning what we want to return from this function. So this is an artificial slowdown just to mimic an expensive function, okay, to tell you the actual use case of the use memo hook. So let's go to the to-do list component again. So let me tell you a bit more about this to-do list component. So here you can see we have two use states. Okay, if you don't know about use state hook, then you should watch the video on use state hook. That's a very small video. You can just go there, watch it and come back. It's some 5 minutes video. That will not take much time. uh, Same, I will put it in the description. So let's continue. So this tab is actually which is passed inside the filter to do's. Okay, and this count state variable is basically related to this button. So whenever this button is clicked, this handle click function will be triggered, which will set the count to count plus 1. That is, this handle click method, whenever it will be called, it will increment the counter by 1. So it's basically, this button is only an increment by 1 counter, and I have just put this to explain you that this is something which is independent, which is not related to something anything else, like this tab or anything else like that. Okay, so whenever the count changes, it triggers a whole re-render of the component, and then we will see that how our use memo comes in. Okay, so I hope you have understood the whole like this component. I think this is missing. So there are three buttons. These three buttons will change the tab state variable whenever they are clicked. So first, whenever it is clicked, it will change it to all. Second, it will change it to active. Third, it will change it to completed. And then we have the list of to-dos. And inside this, we are passing the visible to-dos, which we are getting after uh, getting from the return value of filter to-dos function. And remember that this filter to-dos function is expensive because there is an artificial slowdown inside it. Okay, now let's go back to the UI and see what is in there. Let me refresh the UI. Okay, so here you can see that this all active and completed, these three tabs are there. Then this is the increment counter which I have shown. So for this we have one state variable, for this we have one state variable. Now based on whatever tab we have clicked, the filter to do's function will be called, and you can see this whole list, this 50 list of 50 items, these will change accordingly. So all means the crossed ones as well as the active ones. Crossed ones are actually completed. If I press active, you just, okay, let me clear this. Just see, whenever we press this active, the UI will take some time before it shows us all the active lists. So let me do that. Now clicked. Can you see it takes some time? Now let's say I click completed. It will take some time before making it all completed. So what is happening? What is happening? And in these cases, you can see that, okay, filter to do's has been called, then the artificial slowdown happens, and then the list component is called. Okay, this list component is basically this one. Okay, this one. So if you go inside that, you can see that, okay, if you go inside that, you can see that we have a console log list component called. Okay, let me remove this, it's not necessary. Okay, so this list component called, which is also shown on the UI, list component called. So these all are working fine. But why is this slowdown in the UI happening? This slowdown in the UI is happening because the filter to do's function is being called. This filter to do's function is being called whenever we change the tabs. This set tab, whatever active or all or completed based on the click, this state variable changes, and whenever the state variable changes, a whole re-render of the UI happens, and whenever the re-render of the UI happens, it will populate the visible to-dos by calling this filter to-dos method. And you know that the filter to-dos have an artificial slowdown inside that. So that is the reason that the slowdown is happening whenever we are changing the tab. But whenever we click this button, okay, this you pressed me count times, this is not at all related to this filter to do's and visible to do's, right? Because the tab is not changed. The tab state variable only changes whenever we click any of these buttons, but the tab value is not changed whenever we press this button. Let's see what will happen if we press the counter button. Okay, let me refresh this. Okay, now it is showing all. Okay, let me show active. So you will see that all the active to do's are there. Let me clear this, and if I press this, it should happen seamlessly, right? But you see, it took some time. Can you see? It took some time. Yeah. Why is it taking this time? Can anyone understand that why it is taking this time? Why? What is the reason? The reason is that every time the handle click is called, this set count variable will change the count state variable, which will trigger the whole re-render of the UI. And whenever the re-render happens, this visible to-dos will be populated by calling the filter to-dos again, and the filter to-dos has the artificial slowdown method. Now we want that whenever the tab is not changed, filter to do should not be called, and we should be using the previous value of filter to do's. Okay, the previous render value of the filter to do's return value, because the tab is not changed. If the tab has changed, then call filter to do's, but if the tab has not changed, then no need to call filter to do's. For that we have useMemo. I hope you have understood the use case now. Okay, so now as the visible to do's is now getting populated with a wrapper of useMemo, now the filter to do's will only get called when this tab value changes, but whenever the count value changes, it will not get called. Can I show you now on the UI how it looks like? Okay, let me clear this. Whenever I press active, you can see filter to do's is called. Okay, but whenever I press this, can you see the filter to do's is called now? No, it will not be called. Why? Because the tab value is not changing, only the count value is changing. So visible to do's, okay, so the use memo is actually using the previous value of visible to do's, and it is not calling the filter to do's again. I hope this is very much easy to understand based on my explanation. Okay, now I want to show you one more thing which is happening here. So you can see that the visible to do's we are passing onto this list. Okay, now whenever the tab value changes, the filter to do's tab is called and the visible to do's gets a new value. Okay, that is fine. But whenever the tab value doesn't change, then the visible to do's will contain the same value as it is the previous render value. Then why is it that this list which only passes the visible to do's inside it, why it is called again? Why it is called again? What is the reason? Because you can see the list component called whenever we are pressing the counter button. So if I press the counter button, still the list component is called. So why is that? The reason is the default behavior of React, where it doesn't matter that it has the same props as the previous render or not. Whenever the parent is re-rendered, the child also this child also gets re-rendered, and that's how the child is called. It might happen that the list component is a very heavy component which might have a lot of computations or a lot of UI to show. In those cases, we don't want unnecessarily calling list component. So for that, what we have the memo API. I have also told about the memo API in one of my videos. There is a separate video for this, so please go and watch if you haven't. That's also a small video. And I have also told that in the further part of the memo will be shown in the use memo hook, and that is what I am showing now. So you can understand what is the use case of memo here. Okay, so what happens is the work, I will give a little bit of glance here. The work of memo is, if the items don't change, if these items don't change which is passed, so basically this items is the visible to do. So if the visible to do's don't change, then please don't call the list component again. Just show the previous list component on the UI. You don't need to render it again. That is the use of memo. So whenever the props are not changing, don't call the component again. Just show the previous version of the component on the UI. That is it. Now you will see that as we have wrapped the list component inside a memo, that will not be called. Whenever we are changing this count variable. So let's see it in action. Let me refresh this. Let me clear this, and you pressed me 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing will happen on the console log because it is not at all called. The list component is not called. Now I will change it to active. Now you can see that the list component getting called, filter to do is getting called. This is happening because the tab is changing, and as the tab value is changing, this tab value is changing, it is calling the filter to do's again. It is changing the value of visible to do's, and thus the list is also called because the visible to do's value is changed. So that's about the whole thing. So we have covered the use memo hook here. We have covered how use memo works with memo API. All the use cases I have explained. So hopefully you have understood the video. If you have any doubts, please post it in the comments. I will be very happy to answer them. Thank you.